you ever seen an image of strength? Like this? A picture of power? Like this? A portrait of courage? Like this? Ask yourself these questions, because the answers tell you how superhuman this man really was. But Jim Brown was so much more than arguably the greatest football player of all time. That was clear when he retired before he turned 30, to become a new kind of pioneer. A black action star in the movies. A Hollywood leading man who refused to be cornered into how the world cast him. And that was just the start of the legacy he built outside the football field.
Jim Brown, the actor. Now, a fun thing to ask yourself would be, is Jones the kind of guy that's going to give you a Jim Brown movie viewing list? Oh yeah, I absolutely am. Because if you think the Jim Brown greatness stops at football, you are sadly mistaken. Most of you have probably made the connection, whether in passing, maybe you've seen these movies, maybe you heard through the grapevine, but most of you have probably understood that Jim Brown was in the movie Original Gangsters, was in the movie Mars Attacks, and was in the movie Any Given Sunday. Now, those are more recent, and we will definitely get to those. In 1964, Jim Brown earned his first acting credit with a movie called Rio Conchos.
Jim Brown, All-American, All-Pro football star, in his first motion picture, with a heart as big as his gigantic stature.
Early in his acting career, there was a very heavy concentration of essentially glorified westerns. So, the only reason that one's on the list is it's his first acting credit, and if you can get your hands on it, it's interesting. If this is the topic that really interests you, and you want to watch a lot of it, Rio Conchos is on the list. His second acting credit we've already talked about, and that was 1967 was the release year for The Dirty Dozen.
Don't sweet talk nobody. You know why I'm here. Or maybe you think I should have let those cracker bastards go right ahead and castrate me.
I'd say that you had considerable justification.
Thank you, Mr. Major, sir. I really do thank you for that.
I'm offering you an alternative, which means you can keep on fighting.
Who for, Major?
For yourself if you want. But the Krauts, they're the real master race merchants.
That's your war, man, not mine. You don't like the Krauts, Major, you fight them. Me, I'll pick my own enemies.
That was the movie he shot in London in 1965 when Art Modell decided he was going to puff his chest out. That resulted in Jim Brown's retirement. So even if your only interest is football, you still need to have seen Dirty Dozen. If you haven't seen The Dirty Dozen, you need to. It's a who's who of an acting cast in a movie designed to showcase an ensemble level of talent. I don't know that it might be a stretch to say that Dirty Dozen is one of those you have to see before you die. I don't know that it's on the AFI 100, but in my humble opinion, it should be. Believe it or not, the very next one is the next most famous movie that he's credited for, and that's because something big happened. This movie came out in 1969, and it was called 100 Rifles. If that doesn't mean anything to you, it will in a moment. 100 Rifles was a movie where he would star opposite Raquel Welch. Yeah, that Raquel Welch, the one from Andy Dufresne's Cell and Shawshank Redemption. That Raquel Welch. To this point in time, 1969, there had never, ever been a scene in a movie or television show that showed an interracial love scene of any kind. And for 1969, it was about as racy and steamy as it gets. A seemingly white woman is seen in the throes of passion with a black man. Now, in 1969, there were a lot of people that were against this. This was a huge, big moment. But luckily, time and history proved out that it was a move that needed to be made, and it was done tastefully, and it paved the way for basically everything that followed in that area. So 100 Rifles is absolutely on the must-watch list.
For all the bad things I have said to you, I give you this.
(1972 and 1973 had two movies from the same franchise that's very interesting. The first one, in 1972, was just called simply Slaughter. And Slaughter, to me, felt like a darker, more brutal juxtaposition to what we saw in 1971 with Shaft. Shaft was a lawman. Slaughter is not. Slaughter is probably closer to John Wick than he is to Shaft. That was your typical big, bad Jim Brown, just wrecking shop, basically. So in 1973, they almost immediately release the sequel to Slaughter, which is Slaughter's Big Ripoff. Now, at the end of Slaughter, spoiler alert, Slaughter pisses off the mob. So in Slaughter's Big Ripoff, they come after him sort of like, we use the John Wick reference, just like John Wick 3, when everybody's coming after John Wick, that's the idea, is that the mob is sending people to go get Slaughter, take him out. So then Slaughter decides to rip off the mob.
Jim Brown is Slaughter. It's not only his name, it's his business.
I'm gonna kill him and anybody else that gets in my way.
Whoever comes, whoever it is, I'll kill them. I'll kill them all.
They all wanted Slaughter.
Baddest cat that ever walked the earth.
Watch out, 'cause Slaughter's back in town. Jim Brown is Slaughter, the baddest cat that ever walked the earth.
Now, how would you like to be picking your teeth out of your lips?
They wanted Slaughter dead. And now I got a big problem.
No, why can't we just correct the problem?
Because my nephew killed a dog. And he stole a car.
So we're giving everything up for a car?
It is John Wick's car.
It's one man.
Who? The nobody?
That nobody is John Wick.
They're gonna get Slaughter or get slaughtered. Jim Brown is Slaughter.
Baddest cat that ever walked the earth.
1974, Free the Hard Way.
Jim Brown. Fred Williamson. Jim Kelly. The Big Three. Together for the first time. They do it their way.
Free the hard way. 3 cities and 3 of us.
Together for the first time.
1979. This one will slide under most people's radar. You probably even would see the title and just scroll away. But this one's really interesting because even in 1979, in the first 5 minutes of this movie, you get a very strong sense of the racial tone of the country in World War II. Now, the movie comes out in 79, but really it's a World War II movie.
You can't expect an officer to live in the same hut with Negroes, can you? But the hut is fine. My men took special effort to make you Americans comfortable. I don't care what the circumstances are, we don't bunk down with Negroes. On the ship, they have their quarters, we have our quarters. Is that clear?
That is loud and clear. But this ain't no ship. And this surely ain't no United States, no goddamn America. And as tired as I am, man, I ain't taking orders from nobody. Except them Japanese.
But we're still in the Navy. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing has changed.
You are surely right about that, Lieutenant.
Another one that I just really enjoy, I don't know if it's necessarily a must-watch, is One Down, Two to Go. Again, another blaxploitation, sort of get the bad guys kind of thing.
The deadliest sport in the world meant big money, and big money meant the mob. But when the mob tried to muscle in on the brothers muscled right back. Jim Brown, Fred Williamson, Jim Kelly, Richard Roundtree. 4 dudes that just don't pay to mess with. In 1 down, 2 to go.
You may be good in kung fu, but I'm an expert in gun fu.
That's where we draw a line in the sand. Because from here on out, the movies I'm going to list, you absolutely should have heard by name by now. Even if it has nothing to do with Jim Brown, just various conversations that you might have had with people about movies over the years, most of these you'll know. In 1987, did you know that Fireball from The Running Man, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Running Man, was Jim Brown? His hair's different, but that's it. So yeah, next time you go to watch The Running Man, keep an eye out for a very large man with gray streaks in his hair, and you'll notice that that is actually Jim Brown. 1988, he actually was in I'ma Get You Sucker, which is not something even I knew on the first viewing. Granted, I saw that movie when it came out, but later on in life, when I went back to revisit it, I absolutely spotted him. So, Jim Brown, I'ma Get You Sucker.
Oh, damn, the Soldier Boy's here, man! You okay? Where you hit it? In my foot. Oh, my God. They shot me in my bunion, man. Man, I can't go on.
Ain't nobody shooting my baby.
Ma! Ma, you promised!
Shh, I know I promised. What am I supposed to do? Stand by while they kill you? Come on, let's get out of here. Follow me.
No, you follow me.
I don't care who follows who. If y'all step on my bunion, I'll kill both of you.
This was another year that had 2 Jim Brown movies. Both of them you should know. First one is Original Gangsters. That cast has more than a couple, that's why it's called Original Gangsters, original blaxploitation hero type characters in there. And Jim Brown's one of them.
You want something, brother?
Your name's Sparrow?
Yeah? Why?
I just wanted to see what you look like. Right now, I'm just looking for names and faces.
You're Jake Trevor. My old man told me how great of a fighter you was.
Yeah, your old man was right.
I heard of you. Heard you were back in town. What for?
Kenny Thompson.
Never heard of him.
That kid who was at the basketball?
Hey, what's your interest?
This is my son, man. And where does that leave you, Spyro? You're dead, man.
Now, the other one in 1996, if you're not familiar with Original Gangsters, I cannot fathom that you've never heard of this one. And we already mentioned it before, and that is Mars Attacks. Mars Attacks, again, has an incredible cast. Absolutely stacked. That being said, Mars Attacks is really campy. But it's supposed to be, that's the point. But even in its campiness, as you follow the plot, the good guys don't get away if Jim Brown's Byron Williams isn't beating up over 100 aliens on the tarmac. So, even in that movie, clearly in probably pushing 60, he still looks every bit the menacing athlete that he's portraying in that movie.
Me, Byron Williams, heavyweight champion of the world.
little tricky. You may not have noticed, but in 1998, Spike Lee made a movie called He Got Game, which starred Denzel Washington, and then Milwaukee Bucks star Ray Allen, who played the main character Jesus Shuttlesworth. What you might not have noticed is that Jim Brown is in He Got Game, believe it or not. He's not in top billing, but he's in it.
Let's sit down. There's a couple of things I think we better go over. Number one, you ain't on vacation. You're not a free man. In the eyes of the law, you are still a convicted felon.
Your ass is ours.
And here there's some money. Get some clothing, toothpaste, deodorant, personal effects, whatever have you. Take a shower. Wash your ass.
These final two are interesting because one just feels like a role he was born to play, and then the other one he plays himself. And the first one I'm referring to is 1999, maybe my favorite all-around football movie of all time, is Any Given Sunday. Another really solid, impressive cast. In Any Given Sunday, Jim Brown plays the defensive coordinator for the Miami Sharks. The actual Lawrence Taylor is the star of his defense. And there are moments where Jim Brown is Jim Brown. Like, we joke all the time that a lot of times Denzel Washington is just playing Denzel Washington, or Ryan Reynolds is just playing Ryan Reynolds. In Any Given Sunday, and it was probably the first time in his acting career, but in Any Given Sunday, Jim Brown is essentially playing Jim Brown, but as a defensive-minded coach. It was my favorite football movie, I think, before even factoring in Jim Brown. Oliver Stone's best movie, in my opinion, but I'm not a huge fan of most of the other stuff he does. If you're a football fan and have never seen Any Given Sunday, forget what I'm talking about Jim Brown. You need to watch Any Given Sunday, period.
That ain't no damn hit.
14 years, I know
You
how to
14
hit.
years, you the captain of this goddamn team.
Not the reason
and I'm about to lose my goddamn job. Show me! Get that shit up. Make a shot, goddamn it, baby. Get it. That's my boy, my motherfucker. That's the way to hit, Sean. They think that you all are a bunch of lowbrow Neanderthal shitheads. They think they are gonna gut you and leave you laying on the highway with your insides hanging out. So the goddamn buzzes to eat your no-playing asses.
Coach, you're gonna have a stroke.
I don't get strokes, motherfucker. I give them.
Oh, no.
You know, Jim Brown really was an interesting character in that because, you know, in the movie he was strong, but outside of the movie, you could see that everybody just gravitated to Jim Brown. And they would be very quiet around Jim all the time because there was a reverence, you know, that other players had for Jim.
It's that way to this day too, Aaron. I mean, a couple of years ago on NFL Network, we had a show to celebrate his 80th birthday and invited all a host of Hall of Fame running backs from yesteryear, but you know, not from Jim's year. Franco Harris and Marshall Faulk and Eric Dickerson, and to come in and celebrate with him. And it's the same thing today. It's still the same thing today. I hosted an NFL 100 all-time team show last year. Emmitt Smith came in, and honestly, it's all bowing down to the GOAT, Jim Brown, still to this day.
And then the last movie we're going to talk about, and by no means am I going to tell you that you need to watch this. This is just on here because it's the last thing he did, acting-wise. As a Browns fan, as a huge Jim Brown fan, and as you'll find as we move along, an absolute draft junkie. I should tell you have to watch this movie. I'm not going to, though. 2014, a movie that had been talked about for almost 10 years finally comes out. I'm excited about it because it is a movie who at its core is about the Cleveland Browns and is about the NFL draft. What we got was a movie starring Kevin Costner, Jennifer Garner, with a ton of sports cameos and not much else. I didn't love the Cleveland stuff, specifically. As a Cleveland fan, as someone who loves that city, why any director, any crew, anyone involved with this would have used Aaron Goldhammer. Now, I will tell you for the rest of eternity that Cleveland has maybe one of the worst sports media groups in the country. Reporter for reporter, analyst for analyst, host for host, is just awful. And it has been for 20 years. But they could have absolutely picked someone who's at least more Cleveland. I won't go into any great detail. I don't want to run that guy through the mud. It's just like, what? Aaron Goldhammer, to a Cleveland fan, almost ruins the movie. And if that wasn't bad enough, what actually does ruin the movie for anyone who's actually kind of a draft guy, whether you're just a fan or an analyst or, God forbid, an actual scout or GM were to come across this video, the draft aspect of the movie Draft Day is awful. Absolutely awful. And it feels a lot like a scenario where someone at the studio level saw the original cut of the movie and thought it would be too complicated for an average football fan to follow. So as a football fan, I absolutely do not love that movie. Now, if it happens to be on, and it's towards the end of the movie, and you want to stick around, by the time the draft is over, and they cut to the fast forward where you're seeing opening day of the following season, you do get to see Jim Brown in the owner's box, talking to the owner, talking to Bernie Kosar. But like I said, lots of cameos in that movie, so it's kind of fun for that. But Jim Brown's part in it is literally like 6 seconds long. So, under the context of Jim Brown movies, I don't characterize that as a Jim Brown movie. It's just a sports movie that Jim Brown happens to be in and he's playing himself.
Hey, Anthony, you did a hell of a job with the draft. Congratulations.
Thanks, Jim. Very impressive, Anthony. Thanks, Bernie. I can't take all the credit, but I will.
Of his 56 credits, we just talked about 16 of them. And ones I did not mention that are worth noting, outside of the big screen, Jim Brown also made a number of appearances on limited run characters on TV shows you've probably heard of. And that list is Chips, Knight Rider, TJ Hooker, Cover Up, The A-Team, Living Single, believe it or not, Arliss, and Soul Food. 56 credits. We just talked about 16 plus another 7. Make no mistake about it, Jim Brown was not pretending to be an actor. He was not playing in the acting space. Jim Brown simply willed himself to be great in a new arena. So another feather in the cap of the great Jim Brown under the heading of acting. Jim Brown would land on the scene and he would give Black America a hero to root for. A big, larger-than-life man that demanded to be respected in whatever it was. Whether that's 100 Rifles, whether that's Any Given Sunday. You just knew who he was on screen, and you knew what kind of character he was going to be. Now, we talked about Slaughter, and Slaughter's not a positive guy, but there are moments in the Slaughter movies where I can absolutely believe that people that can identify with Jim Brown on screen, when there were very few people that they could identify with, was someone that they would absolutely revere and love to see. And then Jim would go on to carve out his own little section of Hollywood from 1964 clear through 2014. And if your opinion before this video was that Jim Brown was just a football player who picked up acting along the way as a side job or as a hobby. That was not the case. Jim Brown was a certified star in Hollywood, at least from the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. Then he had a resurgence in the 1990s, and we got him in some really big, popular movies that most people had seen, whether you're into, the blaxploitation type movies that he was in the 60s or not. You now had avenues that you were going to see Jim Brown in an acting role in big-time movies. The Running Man, Any Given Sunday, Original Gangsters, I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. I mean, these are not small things. This is not like he was in a couple indie films and that's it, but we're going to talk about it. No, he was in 56 movies. You don't get into 56 movies if you're a bad actor. Jim willed his way into being great in a new arena. And it wouldn't be the last time.